So Mehdi Hasan spoke to a Biden administration official, and he has a really good question about U.S. support for war crimes while we, fall on our fainting couch and pretend to be so against war crimes. Take a look.
Ambassador, it is good to see the US government calling out war crimes in Ukraine and assisting in the documenting of those war crimes. But I do wonder, and I'm sure many others wonder too, where is that same kind of commitment when it comes to other conflicts? For example, the war in Yemen, where multiple atrocities have been documented by both sides, but one of those sides is our ally, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Wouldn't we have more credibility if we condemned war crimes by our friends and not just by our enemies?
The United States has worked tirelessly to promote accountability and documentation of abuses all across the world. There's a number of situations within the International Criminal Court that we have been very supportive of, including by conveying fugitives, for example, to The Hague so that they can stand trial for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And so the standards apply to all parties, and we are looking at all conflicts around the world with an eye towards bringing the parties better into compliance with international law.
But with respect to Ambassador, you didn't address the Yemen war example. I mean, back in 2016, Reuters reported that despite internal discussion among US government lawyers that the United States could be implicated in war crimes for supporting a Saudi-led air campaign in Yemen, the Obama administration went ahead with $1 billion arms sale. Wouldn't we have more credibility if we called out war crimes by our own allies instead of selling them weapons? The most obvious example in the world today being the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. How come Joe Biden can call Vladimir Putin a war criminal, but not others, for example, the Crown Prince?
Well, the Biden administration has diminished the amount of support that it's providing to the Saudis within the war in Yemen, and working hard on all parties to ensure that they bring their conduct into compliance with international humanitarian laws. As I mentioned, the standards apply to all parties.
Yeah, no, they don't. The standards don't apply to all parties. That's not true at all. So if you are one of our allies, you're off the hook. You're off the hook. I mean, it's the classic, old school notion of like one person's terrorists are another person's freedom fighters, And so it's the language that you use around it which can shape perceptions on it. So if you don't like a government and what they're doing, you call them a regime. Like when it was Assad, for example, we'd always say, the Assad regime, the Assad regime, the Assad regime. And you say they're fighting against, quote unquote, moderate rebels. Whereas from the opposite perspective, you could say it's the legitimate government versus terrorists. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of those so-called moderate rebels, by the way, were al-Nusra, literally jihadists. But it's all about the language you use to shape and shift people's perceptions on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So when it comes to Saudi Arabia, you have them on the fucking human rights panel, which is laughable. And we arm them all the time. And the U.S. media, by and large, with some exceptions here and there, but they just don't talk about the humanitarian crisis that much. It's the number one humanitarian crisis in the world. I mean, I've told you guys this a million times. We're blockading the country. Saudi Arabia is blockading the country. They're not allowing in food. They're not allowing in medicine. People are starving to death in the country. You have a bombing campaign which has killed probably hundreds of thousands at this point, and they attack civilian infrastructure all the time: mosques, hospitals, schools, open-air markets, et cetera, et cetera. But since they are our ally, not only is there no talk about sanctioning them or bringing them up on war crimes in a war crimes trial, we're still arming them. And the argument from the Biden administration is like, sure, we're arming them, but it's okay because it's all defensive arms. The previous guy, Trump, he would arm them for offensive reasons. We're against that. But we will arm them for defensive reasons. So it's just a PR game because it's the same thing that they're doing. They're not actually using the weapons for defensive reasons. So it's just a PR game. I'm going to pretend to be more virtuous in my arming of the brutal authoritarian regime as they committed genocide. And so what she's saying there is just factually wrong. If you're one of our allies, you're off the hook by definition. If you're an official U.S. state enemy, we will highlight every little thing you do that's bad and wrong and say you should stand trial for war crimes and we should sanction you and we should have regime change over there. Look at how we talk about Iran. Look at how we talk about North Korea. Now, that's not to say, like in North Korea, for example, that they aren't doing hideous, horrendous things. Of course they are. But it's a matter of where do we put our focus. We're going to put our focus on our official enemy states who do bad things and just give our allies a pass when they do sometimes equally bad things or sometimes even worse bad things. And Russia's a great example of this. I mean, yes, the invasion of Ukraine was absolutely illegal. And the laundry list of reasons are horrendous. And Putin has imperial ambitions. He wants the natural gas that's in Crimea, wants the natural gas that's in Ukraine. He is a war criminal. That's factual to say. But at the same time, we are super selective in how we apply this standard. And, for example, I said our allies are off the hook. I didn't even bring up the obvious point yet. We're off the hook ourselves. As Noam Chomsky famously said, every post-World War II U.S. president, if the Nuremberg laws were upheld, would be hanged. That's true. I mean, look at Bush and Cheney. I mean, for the love of God. Illegal wars, torture, spying on all the American people. I mean, the list of crimes are endless. And if we actually upheld international law, they'd be locked up in The Hague. But not only are they not, we actually have passed a law in the U.S. that we will invade The Hague if they indict or convict our war criminals. So this is one of the reasons why it's so hard for anybody to take the U.S.'s moral posturing seriously, is because we obviously don't apply these things objectively. We view ourselves as above the law. We're sort of like Alonzo from Training Day. It's okay when I do it because I'm the good guy, by definition. And that's where we are. And so credit to Mehdi Hasan for pressing on this issue of human rights and war crimes. There is no squaring that circle for the U.S. government. The only way for them to answer a question like that is to just flat out lie. And that's what we saw. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.